Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most overlooked disasters in Arctic exploration history. You're about to spend a year trapped in ice, watch your ship sink beneath frozen seas, and to discover why 11 people never made it home. So yeah, you probably won't survive this either. But before we dive into the cold, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not going to chase you with a harpoon over it. And hey, drop your city and the time you're watching this down in the comments. I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours, learning about disasters that most history books forgot to mention. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a warm blanket, and let's walk together into the frozen nightmare of the Karluk. It's January 10th, 1914. You're standing on the deck of a wooden ship in complete darkness. The Arctic night has swallowed everything. You can't see the ice surrounding you, but you can hear it. Listen to that sound. It's like a living thing groaning and grinding against the hull. The wood beneath your feet shivers, not the gentle rocking of waves, but something violent, something wrong. The temperature is 40 below zero. Your breath freezes the moment it leaves your mouth, forming tiny ice crystals that tinkle when they hit your coat. It sounds almost musical, almost pretty, if you weren't terrified. The ship lurches. You grab the railing to steady yourself, and even through your thick gloves you can feel how cold the metal is, cold enough to freeze skin on contact. The groaning gets louder. Down in the engine room, someone shouts. You recognize Captain Bartlett's voice, but you can't make out the words over the screeching of ice against wood. It's the kind of sound that makes your teeth hurt, like nails on a chalkboard, but 1,000 times worse. Here's a historical fact. The Karluk was a 29-year-old fishing boat that had absolutely no business being in the Arctic. She was originally built to catch fish near Alaska, the kind of boat that would head home when winter started looking serious. Then someone had the bright idea to use her for Arctic exploration. They slapped some reinforcement on her hull and called it good. Imagine trying to survive a demolition derby in a smart car. That's basically what you're doing right now. You're not alone on this ship. 24 other people are scattered across the deck and below, all wearing every piece of clothing they own. There's the captain, Bob Bartlett, who's probably the only person here who actually knows what he's doing. There are scientists who thought they were signing up for a nice research expedition. There are sailors who definitely didn't read the fine print. And there's an Inuit family, a mother and father with their 2 young daughters. The youngest is 3 years old. Her name is Mugpee. Remember that name? She's about to become one of the toughest survivors you've never heard of. The ice squeezes tighter. You hear a crack like a gunshot, then another. The ship tilts slightly to one side. Someone near you whispers a prayer. Someone else laughs, but it's the kind of laugh that sounds like crying. You've been trapped in this ice for 5 months now, drifting further from any possible help. You watched your expedition leader leave the ship back in September for what he said would be a 10-day hunting trip. He never came back. The ice carried you away. Now you're somewhere north of Siberia, and the only thing keeping you alive is this creaking wooden boat that's currently being crushed like a soda can. But here's what you don't know yet. This moment, this terrible cracking and groaning, this is just the beginning. Tomorrow the ship will sink. Then you'll face 7 months on an ice sheet that's constantly breaking apart. You'll march through pressure ridges 100 feet tall. You'll watch people disappear into the darkness and never return. You'll eat things that would make a raccoon think twice. And the whole time you'll wonder why nobody's coming to save you. Spoiler alert. It's because hardly anyone knows you're out here. And the ones who do know, they've got their own priorities. Welcome to the Karluk disaster, the Arctic tragedy that history tried to bury almost as thoroughly as the ice tried to bury you. The temperature is dropping. Listen to the wind picking up, howling across the endless ice. Your nose is numb. Your fingers are numb. Your toe stopped hurting about an hour ago, which is actually a bad sign. Frostbite doesn't hurt. It just quietly steals pieces of you when you're not paying attention. Like a pickpocket made of cold. You shift from foot to foot, trying to keep blood flowing. It doesn't help much. Captain Bartlett emerges from below deck. Even in the darkness, you can see he's soaked. Water dripping from his clothes and freezing into icicles. His face tells you everything you need to know. She's going down. The Karluk is done. After months of hoping, of telling yourself that maybe the ice would release its grip come spring, reality hits you harder than the Arctic wind. You're about to become a castaway in the most hostile environment on Earth. And your odds of seeing home again? About as good as a snowball's chance in, well, actually, Snowballs do pretty well out here. Your odds are worse than that. But before we watch this ship sink, before we follow you onto the ice and into a nightmare that'll make you grateful for every warm bed you've ever slept in, we need to understand something. This disaster was avoidable. Completely, totally, absurdly avoidable. The Karluk shouldn't have been here. The expedition was rushed. The ship was wrong. The route was risky, and the leader? Well, he's about to become one of the most controversial figures in exploration history. Some call him a genius, others call him a murderer. By the end of this story, you'll have your own opinion. The ice groans again. Somewhere in the darkness, seal barks. Life continues out here, indifferent to human suffering. The Arctic doesn't hate you. That would require it to notice you exist. It's worse than hate. It's pure, absolute indifference. You could die right here, freeze solid and become part of the ice, and the Arctic would just keep doing its thing. That's what you're up against, not malice, just the cold, mechanical indifference of nature in its most extreme form. Tomorrow you'll abandon ship. Tomorrow you'll step onto the ice with no guarantee you'll ever step onto land again. Tomorrow your fight for survival truly begins. But tonight, in these final hours aboard the Karluk, take a moment to appreciate what you're about to lose. 4 walls, a roof, the illusion of safety. Because once you leave this dying ship, you'll discover that the Arctic holds mysteries darker than its winter night and deaths more strange than anyone back home could imagine. So, are you ready? Because ready or not, the ice doesn't care, it never does. You need to understand something about how you ended up here. This wasn't fate. This wasn't bad luck. This was a series of decisions so questionable that even the people making them knew they were rolling the dice. Let me walk you through how to build a perfect disaster Arctic edition. Rewind to February 13. You're in Ottawa, Canada. Prime Minister Robert Borden is sitting across from a man named Vilhjalmur Stefansson. Stefansson is an anthropologist, an explorer, and by all accounts someone who could sell ice to Eskimos, which is ironic because he's about to sell the Canadian government on an Arctic expedition that'll end with people literally living on ice. He's got big dreams. He wants to find new lands in the Beowulf at sea. He wants to map the Arctic. He wants glory and fame and his name in history books. What he doesn't want is to sweat the small stuff. You know, minor details like having the right ship or proper planning or not getting everyone killed. Here's a historical fact. The Canadian government agreed to fund Stefansson's entire expedition, taking over from American sponsors who had gotten cold feet. The condition? He had to leave by June 1913. That gave him 4 months to organise one of the most ambitious Arctic expeditions ever attempted. 4 months. Most people need longer than that to plan a wedding. Stefansson was planning to conquer the Arctic. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. The answer is everything. First problem, the ship. Stefansson buys the Karluk for $10,000, which sounds like a deal until you realise it's about as seaworthy as a bathtub. She's 29 years old, she's made of wood. Her engine is weak. She's got some reinforcement on her hull, sure, but it's like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. Captain Bartlett takes one look at her and basically says, "This ship is going to die in the ice." He even sent a telegram to Ottawa. Absolutely unsuitable. But Stefansson waves off the concern. The Karluk has survived 14 whaling trips to the Arctic, he says. She'll be fine, he says. Narrator voice. She would not be fine. Imagine buying a used car from a guy who assures you it's perfect while smoke is literally pouring from under the hood. That's the vibe here, and you, along with 24 other people, are about to climb into that car and drive it straight into hell's freezer. Second problem, the crew. Remember how I said this was rushed? You can tell by looking at the people who ended up on this expedition. You've got some legitimate Arctic veterans, sure. Bartlett is a legend, a man who's been north with Peary himself. The Inuit hunters know what they're doing. But you've also got scientists fresh out of university who've never seen serious ice. You've got sailors hired from the docks at Esquimalt, some of whom were drunk when they signed up. One guy has venereal disease, another is addicted to drugs. It's like assembling an Avengers team, but everyone's the guy who dies first in a horror movie. The scientists are fighting with Stefansson before you even leave port. They want to know the plan, they want details, they want to understand the chain of command. Stefansson tells them, essentially, to shut up and trust him. Red flag number 842. When your boss refuses to explain the plan, that's usually because the plan is figure it out as we go and hope for the best. Spoiler, that is exactly the plan. Third problem, supplies. In the chaos of leaving so quickly, nobody really checks if you have everything you need. The pemmican, that concentrated food that's supposed to keep you alive in the Arctic, turns out it's defective, too little fat. This will literally kill people later, but nobody knows that yet. Some of the scientists' equipment ends up on the wrong ship. Communication devices are inadequate. You're essentially heading into one of the most dangerous environments on Earth with the preparation level of someone packing for a weekend camping trip. Listen to the sound of crates being loaded onto the deck. Hear the shouts of dock workers, the creak of ropes, the thump of boxes. Smell the salt air mixed with tar and fish, and the particular scent of a ship that's seen better decades. It's June 17th, 1913. You're departing Esquimalt, British Columbia, heading north. You're excited. This is an adventure. This is history in the making. This is your chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. You don't know that 11 people on this ship will never see home again. You don't know that you're about to spend 7 months fighting for survival, in conditions so extreme they'll make you question whether staying alive is even worth the effort. You don't know that this expedition will become one of history's forgotten disasters, overshadowed by more famous tragedies and buried under political embarrassment. But here's what makes this fascinating in a dark sort of way. Everyone involved had warning signs. Bartlett knew the ship was wrong. Scientists knew the planning was inadequate. Even Stefansson, deep down, must have known he was pushing his luck. They went anyway, because that's what explorers do. They see the risk and say, yeah, but what if it works out? Sometimes it does. This time it absolutely does not. The ship sails north through relatively calm seas at first. You make stops along the way. Nome, Alaska, where you pick up sled dogs. Point Hope, where you take on Inuit hunters. By August you're approaching Point Barrow, the northernmost tip of Alaska. This is where things start to go sideways, which is a gentle way of saying this is where everything catches fire, except you wish it would catch fire, because at least fire is warm. The ice is bad this year. Worse than expected. Worse than most years. Bartlett tries to navigate through it, looking for leads of open water, but the ice has other plans. On August 2nd, 1913, the Karluk becomes stuck, really stuck, frozen solid into the pack ice like a fly in amber. You're still 25 miles from Point Barrow. You can see land, you're so close, but you might as well be on the moon. The ship begins to drift. Not towards your destination at Wrangel Island, towards the wind, towards deeper ice, towards nowhere. You drift for weeks. The ice carries you like a conveyor belt, except this conveyor leads to hypothermia and death. Modern ships have GPS, satellite phones, rescue coordinates. You have a compass, hope, and Captain Bartlett's impressive ability to calculate position by checking the stars. That's it. That's your safety net. By mid-September you've drifted about 100 miles in the wrong direction. Stefansson gathers a small group, 5 other men, and announces he's going hunting. Caribou, he says. Fresh meat to prevent scurvy. He'll be back in 10 days, he says. He takes the best men, the best equipment, and heads onto the ice towards land. You watch him go, your expedition leader, walking away from the ship with confidence that borders on arrogance. 2 days later, the ice shifts. The ship moves, fast, 30 to 60 miles per day, ripped away from where Stefansson left you. He never comes back. Years later, people will argue about this moment. Did he abandon you? Did he make a reasonable decision that got overtaken by bad luck? Was he a genius adapting to circumstances, or a coward fleeing a sinking ship? Historians still fight about this. But as you stand on deck watching the ice carry you further from any hope of rescue, the answer doesn't really matter. You're alone. Your leader is gone, and winter is coming. The wind howls across the endless white. Temperature drops. The sun starts disappearing for longer each day. By November, you'll have constant darkness. The polar night. Imagine the worst seasonal depression you've ever had. Multiply it by 1,000 and add frostbite. That's what's coming. And the whole time the ice squeezes your ship slowly, inevitably, like hands, around a throat. But you try to stay positive. You celebrate Christmas. You play soccer on the ice. Scotland versus rest of world. Rest of world wins 8-3. You tell yourself that come spring the ice will melt and you'll sail home with a great story. You tell yourself Stefansson probably contacted authorities. You tell yourself someone is coming. Nobody is coming, not yet, not for a long time. And tomorrow, when the ice finally wins its slow battle against the Karluk's hull, your real survival story begins. The story that most people never heard. The disaster that got buried almost as deep as some of the men who died in it. So grab your warmest coat, say goodbye to the ship, and get ready for the longest camping trip of your life. One that'll make every difficult moment you've ever experienced feel like a luxury vacation. Because you're about to learn what humans are actually capable of surviving, and what they're not. You wake up on October 3rd, 1913, and realise something is wrong. Not, oh no, I forgot my phone wrong. More like, the universe is personally offended by my existence wrong. The ship is drifting north, away from land, away from Point Barrow, which was already too far away. You were 5 miles from solid ground yesterday. Today you might as well be on another planet. Listen to the ice. Never stops talking. During the day it creaks and groans, a constant conversation between frozen plates the size of parking lots. At night the sounds get worse. Sharp cracks like gunshots, deep rumbles that you feel in your chest. Sometimes a sound like thunder rolling across the white emptiness. The Inuit have dozens of words for different types of ice. You're learning why. Each type kills you differently. Here's a historical fact. The same route that trapped the Karluk had destroyed another ship 30 years earlier. The USS Jeannette got stuck in ice in 1879, drifted for 21 months, and sank. Most of her crew died. The survivors wrote about it, published books about it. You could literally read about how this exact situation ends badly. Stefansson definitely knew about the Jeannette. He just figured he'd be luckier. Spoiler, he's not on the ship anymore, so his luck worked out fine. Yours? Not so much. Captain Bartlett knows what's coming. You can see it in his face during morning meetings. He's trying to stay positive, cracking jokes, keeping morale up. But he's also doing something else. He's preparing. Every day he has crew members haul supplies onto the ice. Food crates, tents, fuel drums, tools. At first this seems paranoid. Why put supplies on the ice when they're safe and dry in the ship? Then you realise, when the ship goes down it'll go fast. Everything inside will sink to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Bartlett is building a life raft made of canned goods and canvas. You help drag a crate of pemmican across the deck and down onto the ice. The wind cuts through every layer you're wearing, and you're wearing all of them. Long underwear, wool shirt, wool sweater, sealskin parka that the Inuit woman made, 2 pairs of pants, sealskin boots with grass stuffed inside for insulation. You look like a walk-in closet. You're still cold. The wind doesn't care about your layers. It finds every tiny gap and reminds you that you're just meat trying to stay warm in a place that wants to freeze you solid. The pemmican crate weighs about 60 pounds. On normal ground this would be manageable. On ice in 40 below temperatures while wearing mittens so thick you can barely grip anything? It's like trying to move furniture while wearing oven mitts and roller skates. You slip, you catch yourself, you slip again. Your lungs burn from breathing frozen air. Each breath feels like inhaling broken glass. This is just moving supplies 50 feet. Imagine marching 80 miles through this. November arrives and takes the sun with it. The polar night begins. For the next few months you'll live in constant darkness, broken only by brief twilight around noon. It's like living inside a sensory deprivation tank, except the tank is trying to kill you. Your body doesn't know what to do. Your brain keeps telling you it's nighttime all the time, forever. People get weird, depressed, angry, paranoid. Imagine scrolling through social media in winter and feeling your mood drop, then multiply that by 1,000 and add the knowledge that you might die out here. Fun times, but you try to keep busy. The scientists still take their observations, temperature readings, ice measurements. They're keeping records like this is a normal expedition, like you're not trapped in a death grip of frozen water. Maybe it helps them feel like they have control. Maybe it's just habit. Maybe they know that if you stop having a purpose, you start having too much time to think about your situation. And thinking about your situation is how you end up screaming into the void at 3 a.m. The ice pressure increases through November and December. The ship shudders more frequently. You hear timbers cracking inside the hull. Small cracks at first, easy to repair. Then bigger ones. The ship is literally being squeezed to death, and you're living inside it. It's like camping inside a soda can while someone slowly closes their fist around it. You know how this ends, you just don't know when. Mackay and Murray, two of the scientists, start getting difficult. They're veterans of Shackleton's Antarctic expedition, which means they survived one polar disaster and apparently thought, let's try for two. They question Bartlett's decisions. They talk about leaving the ship, striking out on their own toward land. Bartlett tells them to wait. They don't want to wait. Tension rises. It's not enough that the Arctic is trying to kill you. Now you've got human drama too, like a reality show, except everyone might die. Christmas 1913. You'd think this would be depressing, stuck in eternal darkness on a dying ship surrounded by ice. But Bartlett pulls off a miracle of morale. There are decorations made from whatever anyone could find. There are presents, small things people made or saved. There's a feast, relatively speaking. Seal meat, canned goods, the last fresh vegetables that haven't rotted. There's a sports tournament on the ice, foot races, tug of war, that soccer game I mentioned. Scotland versus rest of world, 8-3. You play soccer in the Arctic darkness by lantern light on an ice sheet 1,000 miles from help. And for a few hours it almost feels normal. But normal doesn't last. Normal dies on the ice like everything else. By late December you can see land. Wrangel Island or Herald Island, you're not sure which, but it's there, a dark mass against the endless white. About 50 miles away. So close. You could walk there in a few days if the ice was flat and stable. And the ice is neither flat nor stable. It's a nightmare landscape of pressure ridges where the ice sheets collide and buckle upward, creating walls of frozen rubble 30, 50, 100 feet high. Walking through that is like rock climbing, except the rocks are slippery, unstable, and if you fall between them, you either get crushed or drop into water cold enough to kill you in minutes. The ship is making terrible sounds now. On December 26th, everyone feels it. A deep shudder that runs through the entire vessel. Something major just gave way below. Water is seeping in faster than the pumps can handle. Bartlett's face shows nothing, but you know him well enough now to read the tension in his shoulders. He gathers everyone. Time to accelerate the supply transfer. Everything that's not nailed down needs to go onto the ice, now. You work through the night. Trip after trip, hauling crates and bags and equipment across the deck and down onto the frozen surface. Your muscles scream. Your lungs ache. Your fingers are numb inside your mittens, which means you're losing sensation, which means frostbite is creeping in. You don't stop, because if you don't get these supplies out, you'll starve on the ice. It's that simple. Work through the pain or die later. Excellent options. Really feeling spoiled for choice here. The wind picks up, driving snow horizontally across the ice. Visibility drops to about 10 feet. You're moving supplies blind, following ropes that Bartlett had the foresight to string between the ship and the supply dump. Without those ropes, you'd walk 10 feet and be lost forever in the white. Arctic explorers have died like that, wandering in circles 50 yards from safety until they freeze. The Arctic doesn't need to be creative. It just has to be cold and white and patient. January 10th, 1914. You wake to that loud bang I described in the first section. The hull has been breached. Water is flooding the engine room. Bartlett gives the order you've been dreading for months. Abandon ship. This is it. This is the moment your life changes from uncomfortable but survivable to probably going to die, but let's give it a shot. The next 12 hours are chaos. Everyone grabs what they can. Personal items, scientific equipment, more food, more fuel. The ship is tilting now, listing to one side as water fills her guts. You're running on adrenaline and terror, that special cocktail that lets you do things you'd normally consider impossible. You carry loads that should require 2 people. You make trips across ice you can barely see. Your body has stopped registering pain. It'll register later, trust me, but right now, shock and necessity have turned off everything except the survival imperative. Move, grab, carry, don't stop. Bartlett stays aboard until the absolute last moment. He's playing records on the ship's Victrola, burning each one after it plays. One last act of defiance, one last moment of beauty before the Arctic takes what's his. When only one record remains, he puts on Chopin's Funeral March. The music drifts across the ice, this gorgeous, mournful piece playing for an audience of frozen water and desperate humans. At 3:15 p.m, as the music plays, Bartlett steps off the Karluk. The ship groans one final time. The ice closes over her like a mouth. She's gone. You stand on the ice, watching the spot where your home used to be. There's a hole in the frozen surface already starting to freeze over. In a few hours you won't even be able to tell a ship sank here. The Arctic is efficient like that. It erases everything. And now you're standing on its surface with 24 other people, 16 dogs, and a cat that someone had the sense to save. You have supplies, yes. You have shelter, sort of. You have a plan, theoretically. What you don't have is a ship. What you don't have is communication. What you don't have is anyone who knows where you are. The nearest human settlement is hundreds of miles away across broken, shifting ice. Your odds of survival are roughly the same as a snowman's odds in a microwave. Actually, the snowman might have better chances. At least microwaves are quick. But you're not dead yet. You're standing on what Bartlett has named Shipwreck Camp. You have igloos built from snow and ice. You have a makeshift kitchen with a stove salvaged from the engine room. You have each other, for whatever that's worth, and you have a choice. Wait on the ice and hope someone finds you, or march toward land and hope you reach it before the ice breaks apart or you run out of food, or any of the 1,000 other things that can kill you out here actually kill you. Bartlett chooses March. Not yet, though. It's still the polar night, still mostly dark. In February, when the light returns, you'll head for Wrangel Island. Until then, you'll live here on the ice. You'll hunt seals when you can find them. You'll burn blubber for fuel. You'll try not to think about what happens if the ice cracks beneath your camp in the middle of the night. You'll fail at not thinking about it. You'll think about it constantly. Listen to the ice settling under your feet. Feel the wind that never stops. Taste the cold, that metallic flavour at the back of your throat. Smell the seal blubber burning in the stove, an oily scent that reminds you you're alive but not comfortably so. This is your life now. This is what survival looks like when you strip away everything soft and warm and safe. This is humanity at its most basic. Can you stay alive one more day? Can you keep moving when everything hurts? Can you hold on to hope when hope seems stupid? You're about to find out. And the answer might surprise you. Humans are remarkably good at suffering. We're built for it in ways that should probably concern us, but we're also good at dying, especially in places like this. The question isn't whether you're tough enough. The question is whether you're lucky enough. Because out here, luck matters more than skill. The ice doesn't care how brave you are. It only cares whether you happen to be standing on the right piece when everything breaks apart. Sweet dreams. Try not to think about the ice cracking. Try not to wonder what drowning in Arctic water feels like. Try not to calculate your odds of seeing home again. Just close your eyes and rest, because tomorrow the real march begins, and it's going to make everything so far look like a pleasant afternoon stroll. Let's rewind to September 20th, 1913. You need to understand this moment because it's where everything goes from bad situation to complete disaster with a side of controversy. Vilhjalmur Stefansson, your fearless leader, the man who sold the Canadian government on this expedition, the man who promised to find new lands and advance science and make Canada proud, calls a meeting. He's going hunting, he says. Caribou. The ship needs fresh meat. Scurvy is a real risk. He'll take 5 men, 2 Inuit hunters, some dogs, and supplies for 10 days. He'll be back before you know it. Here's what he takes with him. His best friends from the expedition. His secretary, the photographer, an anthropologist, the 2 Inuit who actually know how to hunt caribou, 2 sledges loaded with premium equipment. Oh, and he tells Bartlett, if the ship moves, just leave some markers on the shore so we can find you. No big deal, we'll catch up. Here's what happens next. 2 days later, the ice shifts. The ship drifts west at 30 to 60 miles per day. Stefansson's hunting party is on shore watching their ship disappear into the white. They eventually make it to Alaska, safe and sound. Stefansson continues the expedition on land, exploring and mapping, acting like losing his flagship and its crew is a minor inconvenience. Like missing a connecting flight, except the flight was full of people depending on you for survival. Now, historians argue about this moment endlessly. Was it abandonment? Was it reasonable decision-making overtaken by bad luck? Let's examine the evidence like we're scrolling through Reddit trying to figure out who's the jerk, in a relationship post. Evidence that Stefansson abandoned you. He took the best men, he took the best equipment. He left during a situation where the ship was already trapped and drifting. He said 10 days but brought enough supplies to be gone longer. After the ship disappeared, he didn't mount a rescue attempt. He just continued his expedition on land. For years. He eventually got honours and medals for his Arctic work. Meanwhile, you're eating rotten seal meat on Wrangel Island, wondering if anyone remembers you exist. Evidence that this was bad luck. Stefansson did need to hunt. Fresh meat prevents scurvy. The ship had been stationary for days. He legitimately thought he could find it again. He left valuable personal property on board. After separating from the ship, he did try to notify authorities, though try is doing some heavy lifting in that sentence. And to be fair, he didn't control the ice. Nature separated them, not intent. So what's the truth? Here's my take, and you're free to disagree in the comments. Stefansson made a calculated risk that worked out great for him, and terrible for you. He's the kind of leader who plays fast and loose with other people's lives while making sure his own odds stay pretty good. Is that murder? No. Is it abandonment? Technically no. Is it the behaviour of someone you trust with your life? Absolutely not. Imagine your boss leaving work saying he'll be back in an hour, taking the best employees and the company credit card with him, and then when the building catches fire, he just shrugs and starts a new company. That's the vibe. Legal? Sure. Ethical? But here's what makes this fascinating. Stefansson's version of events, published in his into-one book The Friendly Arctic, paints himself as a reasonable explorer making tough decisions. The survivors' versions, particularly McKinley's account written decades later, paint Stefansson as a glory-seeking egomaniac who cared more about his reputation than his crew. Who's right? Both, probably. People are complicated. You can be a brilliant anthropologist and a terrible leader. You can make contributions to science and still be the kind of person people want to punch. Back on the ship, you watch Stefansson's party disappear into the distance. You're not worried. 10 days, he'll be back. Except day 11 comes and goes. Day 12, day 13. The ice is moving faster now, pulling the ship westward. By day 15 you realise he's not coming back. He can't. Even if he wanted to, even if he's frantically searching for the ship right now, the ice has carried you too far. You're alone. The mood shifts. Some people are angry. Mackay and Murray, those Shackleton veterans, start talking openly about Stefansson's poor planning. They're not wrong, but complaining doesn't change your situation. You're still trapped, still drifting, still hoping the ship survives long enough to reach open water in spring. Other people are scared. The Inuit family is stoic. They've lived in the Arctic their whole lives. They know how bad this can get. You can see it in their eyes. This calm acceptance that death is always nearby in their homeland, patient and cold and inevitable. Captain Bartlett tries to keep spirits up. He runs a tight ship, gives people tasks, maintains discipline. But even he must lie awake at night wondering if Stefansson is organising a rescue or just writing in his journal about interesting ice formations. You'll find out later that Stefansson did notify authorities. Eventually. After finishing some mapping work. Priorities, right? Here's a historical fact. When Stefansson finally published his account of the expedition, several survivors were furious. They felt he misrepresented what happened, blamed others for failures, and showed no appropriate grief for the men who died. They petitioned the Canadian government for an inquiry. The government declined. Too much time had passed, too politically awkward. Stefansson had powerful friends, so the official story became his story. The survivors' anger got buried along with their dead friends. This is why the Karluk disaster is buried in history. Not just because fewer people died than in some other expeditions, not just because World War I started soon after and overshadowed everything, but because powerful people had incentive to downplay the controversy. Canada didn't want to admit their flagship expedition was a mess. Stefansson didn't want to admit he made catastrophic decisions, so everyone agreed to focus on the heroic rescue narrative and gloss over the preventable disaster parts. History gets written by people who survive and have good publicists, but you don't know any of this yet. You're standing on a ship in October 1913, watching your leader disappear toward land, not knowing you'll never see him again. Not knowing he'll go on to have a long, successful career while you're about to spend 7 months in frozen hell. Not knowing that when you finally get rescued, if you get rescued, people will celebrate Bartlett as a hero and barely mention your name. You're about to become a footnote in someone else's adventure story. How does that feel? The temperature drops another degree, the wind picks up. You head below deck where it's slightly warmer, though warmer is relative. It's like choosing between being hit by a car or a truck. Both hurt. One just hurts a little less. You huddle in your bunk wearing every piece of clothing you own and try to sleep. Outside, the ice continues its conversation with the hull, creaking, groaning, threatening. The ship rocks gently, not from waves but from ice pressure, the frozen sea squeezing. Tighter. You dreaming about home, warm beds, hot food, people who aren't slowly going crazy from isolation and fear. When you wake up, the dream feels more real than your current situation. That's the dangerous part of being trapped somewhere terrible. Your brain starts checking out. Reality is too harsh, so it offers you fantasy instead. You have to fight that urge. You have to stay present, stay focused, stay ready. Because the moment you drift mentally is the moment you make a fatal mistake. The Arctic punishes distraction with death. Days blur together. The ship drifts west, then northwest, then southwest. The ice is playing with you, a cat with a mouse, except the cat is the size of an ocean and made of frozen water and completely indifferent to your suffering. You pass the time helping move supplies, helping hunt seals, helping maintain the ship, even though everyone knows it's temporary. You're bailing water on the Titanic. You're rearranging deck chairs. You're doing something because doing nothing means accepting that you're helpless. And humans hate feeling helpless. By December, you can see land occasionally through breaks in the weather. Wrangel Island, Herald Island, somewhere out there. 50 miles, maybe 60, that's close. That's nothing. In normal circumstances, you could drive that in an hour. But these aren't normal circumstances. The ice between you and land is constantly moving, breaking, reforming. Pressure ridges rise and fall like mountains made of frozen chaos. Open leads of water appear without warning. The temperature is 40, 50, 60 below zero. Your breath freezes instantly. Your eyelashes freeze together if you blink too slowly. One morning you're helping check the seal traps and you notice something. The ice beneath your feet trembles. Not much, just a slight vibration. You mention it to Bartlett. He nods. He's felt it too. The ice is getting ready to break up. Not all at once, but section by section, piece by piece. Soon you'll be standing on an ice floe that's shrinking. Soon the ship's protection, such as it is, will be gone. Soon you'll face the choice, stay with a sinking camp or march toward land across ice that might not support your weight. Spoiler, you're going to march, and some of you won't make it. But before we get to that nightmare, before we watch people disappear into the white and never return, take a moment to appreciate where you are right now. Yes, you're trapped. Yes, you're cold. Yes, your leader abandoned you, but you're still alive. You still have shelter. You still have food. In a few weeks, you'll look back on this moment as the good old days. That's how bad it's going to get. The current misery will become nostalgia. Remember that the next time you think things can't get worse, they can always get worse. The Arctic is very creative about worse. It's January 11th, 1914, 4 p.m. The Karluk is gone. You're standing on sea ice 50 miles from the nearest land, surrounded by supplies and 19 other people who look exactly how you feel, terrified but trying not to show it. The temperature is minus 40, the sun won't rise for another month, and Captain Bartlett is calmly explaining the plan like this is a minor inconvenience instead of a potential death sentence. Welcome to Shipwreck Camp. You're home for the next 2 months. Think of it as camping, except if camping wanted to kill you and had the tools to do it. The good news, you have supplies. The bad news, everything else. Let me describe your new accommodations. You're not sleeping in a tent like some casual weekend glamper. You're in an igloo. Bartlett had the foresight to have these built before the ship sank, using blocks of snow cut and stacked in a spiral dome. The Inuit family helped design them because they actually know what they're doing. Everyone else is basically learning from YouTube tutorials, except there's no YouTube, just trial and error kills you. The igloo is actually warmer than you'd expect. Snow is an excellent insulator. Once you get a seal oil lamp going inside, the temperature rises to almost bearable levels, maybe 20 degrees. Toasty. You can take off one layer of clothing. Living the dream, the ceiling drips occasionally as warmth melts the inner surface, which then refreezes into a layer of ice. So you're living inside a self-glazing snow dome. Cozy, claustrophobic, surprisingly effective at keeping you alive. Listen to the sound of 20 people trying to organise survival. There's the constant scraping of shovels on ice, people clearing spaces, building walls from snow blocks as wind breaks. There's the barking of dogs, 16 of them, who need to be fed and cared for despite the fact that you're rationing food for humans. There's the hiss and pop of blubber burning in the stove, that smell of burning fat that you'll never forget as long as you live. It's like camping near a fast food restaurant's exhaust vent, except the smell is somehow both better and worse than that. Here's a historical fact. The supplies Bartlett managed to save included enough food for about 60 days if you're careful. That's not a lot. That's 2 months. After that, you're depending on hunting, and seal hunting in Arctic winter is not exactly a guaranteed income stream. Sometimes the seals cooperate, sometimes you stand at a breathing hole for 8 hours and see nothing. It's like fishing, except if you don't catch anything you starve to death. The stakes are a bit higher. The daily routine becomes its own kind of torture. You wake up cold, you're cold all day, you go to sleep cold, your morning routine is checking for frostbite. Your toes, your fingers, your nose, your ears. Any white patches, any numbness? Congratulations, you're losing pieces of yourself to the Arctic. The smart move is to warm the frozen parts gradually. The tempting move is to shove them near the fire. Don't do that. Rapid warming destroys tissue. You'll lose the whole finger instead of just the tip. Ask me how anyone knows this. Actually, don't. It's not a fun story. Breakfast is pemmican if you're lucky. This is that concentrated food I mentioned, the stuff that's supposed to sustain you. Dried meat mixed with fat and sometimes berries. It looks like dog food. It tastes like regret with a hint of survival instinct. The pemmican you have is defective, too little fat, but nobody knows this yet. You just know it doesn't taste great and doesn't seem to help much. Later it'll turn out this pemmican is literally poisoning people, causing kidney failure. But hey, at least you're eating, right? Silver linings. The social dynamics are fascinating in a watching people slowly crack under pressure kind of way. Mackay and Murray, those Shackleton veterans, are openly contemptuous of Bartlett. They think they know better. They've survived Antarctica, after all. They want to strike out on their own, head for land immediately. Bartlett says no. Wait for light. Wait for better ice conditions. Wait for spring. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. If you had a knife, your knife is frozen. Then there's the Inuit family. Karluk, his wife Kiruk, nicknamed Auntie, and their daughters 8-year-old Helen and 3-year-old Mugpee. They're holding up better than most of the experienced explorers. Auntie spends her days sewing warmer clothing from seal skins, teaching people how to line their boots properly, basically keeping everyone alive through indigenous knowledge that Europeans are too proud to admit they need. Helen helps hunt. Mugpee, who's literally 3 years old, adapts to living on an ice floe better than grown men with university degrees. Kids are resilient like that. Also, she doesn't fully understand the danger, which might be a blessing. The cat is still alive too. Remember the cat? Her name is Nigurauruk, which means little black one. She belongs to one of the firemen. This cat is living on an ice floe in the Arctic, hunting the occasional bird, curling up in people's jackets for warmth, generally displaying more survival instinct than several humans. The cat will make it to rescue. The cat will live a long life and have many kittens. The cat is more competent than your expedition leader. Let that sink in. You try to stay busy. Idle hands are the devil's playground, and idle minds in survival situations lead to panic. So you help dig latrines in the ice. You help organise supplies. You help feed dogs. You help check traplines for seals. Every task is exhausting. The cold sucks energy from your body constantly. You're burning thousands of calories a day just trying to stay warm. But you keep moving because stopping means thinking, and thinking means realising how completely screwed you are. At night, the auroras sometimes appear. The northern lights dancing green and purple across the black sky. They're beautiful. Genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful. For a few minutes you forget you're probably going to die out here. You just watch the lights dance and feel small in a good way, connected to something bigger than your fear. Then the wind picks up and reminds you that beauty doesn't keep you warm. Back to the igloo, back to huddling for warmth, back to counting the days until the light returns. January becomes February. The light is slowly returning, twilight at midday growing longer each week. Bartlett makes a decision. He's going to send an advance party to Wrangel Island. They'll establish a camp there, mark the route, make it easier for the main group to follow later. 4 men volunteer. First Officer Alexander Anderson and 3 crew members. They leave on January 21st with dogs, supplies, and Bjarne Marman, the young Norwegian, as a scout. The plan is for Marmon to guide them part way and return to Shipwreck Camp with a report. Marmon comes back a week later with confusing news. He left the party near land, but it wasn't Wrangel Island. It was smaller, probably Herald Island, 38 miles northeast of Wrangel. The party should be fine. They have supplies. They'll figure it out in an established camp. Everyone relaxes slightly. Good. The advance party made it. That's the route the rest of you will follow. Except Anderson's party is never seen alive again. Their remains will be found on Herald Island in 1924, 10 years later. No one can say exactly what killed them. Plenty of supplies nearby. No obvious signs of violence. They probably got trapped by open water, unable to leave the island. Maybe they got sick. Maybe they froze during a particularly bad storm. Maybe they made a stupid mistake and paid the ultimate price. The Arctic doesn't leave neat explanations, it just leaves bodies. But you don't know this yet. You think the advance party is fine. You think you'll see them when you reach land. You think everything's going according to plan. This is a theme with this expedition. By the time you realise something went wrong, it's way too late to fix it. The Arctic operates on Internet Explorer time. Everything loads slowly and then crashes all at once. Mackay and Murray are getting more insistent. They want to leave. They want to go now. Bartlett tries to talk them out of it. Wait for better light. Wait for the main group. Don't split up. Every horror movie ever made has taught us that splitting up is a terrible idea. But Mackay and Murray don't care. On February 5th they leave Shipwreck Camp with 2 other men. Boucher, the anthropologist, and Stanley Morris, a seaman. 4 men, 1 sled, supplies for 50 days, and absolute confidence that they know better than Bartlett. They will never be seen again. Not their bodies, not their equipment. Just 1 scarf belonging to Morris, found later in an ice floe. They either fell through the ice or got crushed by pressure ridges. Probably the former. Open water in the Arctic is invisible. Snow bridges form over leads, thin crusts that look solid but aren't. You step on one, you drop through, and the water is so cold your body seizes up instantly. You can't swim, can't scream, can't do anything but sink. It's over in a minute. Maybe that's a mercy. Quick deaths are rare out here. So now you're down to 17 people. 4 men from Anderson's party are missing, presumed okay. 4 men from Mackay's party are missing, presumed not okay, but nobody says it out loud. The rest of you are preparing for the main march to Wrangel Island. Bartlett has you practicing, sending teams out to blaze trails, set up supply depots along the route, get experience travelling on ice. It's like training for a marathon, except the marathon course is actively trying to kill you and there's no finish line, just the hope of slightly less dangerous ice. The ice is getting worse. You can feel it shifting underfoot. Cracks are opening more frequently. Pressure ridges are rising 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet tall. Walls of broken ice blocks, some the size of cars, piled chaotically by forces that would snap a human like a twig. You're going to have to climb through those with sleds, with supplies, with dogs who are not thrilled about this plan. But there's no choice. Staying at Shipwreck Camp means staying on an ice floe that's shrinking and drifting. Eventually it'll break apart completely or drift past Wrangel Island out to sea. You have to move. You have to try. Staying is guaranteed death. Moving is probable death. Those are your options. This is what survival looks like when you strip away everything comfortable. You don't choose between good options. You choose between terrible options and somehow worse options. February 19th. Bartlett sends the first teams out. Not everyone at once, staggered groups, each preparing the route for the next. You leave on February 24th, one of the last groups. You take one final look at Shipwreck Camp. The igloos, the supply cache, the makeshift kitchen, home for 2 months, you'll never see it again. The ice will eventually break up and reclaim everything. But you leave a message in a copper drum just in case the floe drifts somewhere inhabited. A note explaining what happened, where you went, who was here. It's like leaving a message in a bottle. Except the bottle is a metal drum and the ocean is frozen and nobody will ever find it. You turn toward Wrangel Island, 80 miles across broken ice. 2 weeks of marching if everything goes perfectly. Spoiler, nothing goes perfectly, but you don't know that yet. Right now you're still hopeful, still determined, still alive. The march is about to test exactly how much you want to stay that way. February 24th, 1914. You're standing at the edge of Shipwreck Camp with a loaded sled, 16 dogs barking and straining at their harnesses. and about 40 miles of ice nightmare between you and land. The distance is actually 80 miles because of how you'll have to zigzag around obstacles, but nobody's telling you that yet. Ignorance is bliss. Also, you're about to experience the worst 2 weeks of your life, which is saying something because the last 2 months weren't exactly a spa vacation. The first 100 yards are fine. The ice is relatively flat, packed solid by wind and cold. The dogs pull eagerly, happy to be moving after weeks of waiting. The sled glides smoothly. You think, hey, maybe this won't be so bad. This thought lasts approximately 10 minutes. Then you reach the first pressure ridge. Imagine a wall of ice blocks, not neat blocks like you'd use to build something. Chaos blocks, random chunks of ice the size of refrigerators, cars, small houses, all piled together at weird angles by pressure that could crush a ship. Now imagine climbing over that wall while pulling a sled loaded with supplies. The sled that weighs several hundred pounds. The sled that the dogs can't pull up a vertical ice wall. You have to manhandle it, lift it, shove it, coax it over obstacles while trying not to fall into gaps between the ice blocks, gaps that lead down to black water that'll kill you in 3 minutes. Listen to the sound of effort, grunting, swearing, dogs barking in confusion, the scrape of wood on ice, the crack of ice blocks shifting under your weight, your breath coming in gasps that freeze into fog around your face. This is minute 15 of your march. You have about 2 weeks of this ahead of you. Have fun. Here's a historical fact. The march to Wrangel Island involved crossing at least 30 major pressure ridges. Some were 20 feet tall, some were over 100 feet. Each one required hours of chopping and clearing and hauling. The advance parties had blazed a trail and left markers, but recent storms had destroyed much of their work. You're basically pathfinding through a frozen obstacle course designed by someone who hates you personally. You climb for hours. Your muscles scream, your lungs burn, the cold is so intense that breathing feels like inhaling knives. Each breath stabs your chest. You're sweating from exertion, which is dangerous because sweat freezes. Wet clothing loses all insulating value. You're essentially wrapping yourself in ice, which sounds metal but is actually just stupid. You have to keep moving fast enough to stay warm, but not so fast that you sweat. It's an impossible balance. You fail at it constantly. By the end of day 1, you've travelled maybe 3 miles. 3 miles. At this rate, it'll take you a month to reach Wrangel Island. You don't have food for a month. Nobody mentions this. You all just make camp, feed the dogs, eat your ration of pemmican that tastes like cardboard mixed with disappointment, and try to sleep while the wind screams across the ice. The wind never stops. Never. It's like living inside a jet engine, except colder and more personal. Day 2 is worse. The ice is more broken, leads of open water appear, black gashes into the white. You have to detour around them, adding miles to an already impossible journey. Sometimes the lead is narrow enough to jump, sometimes you have to unload the sled, pass everything across by hand, then coax terrified dogs to leap over water that means instant death. The dogs are smart enough to know this is insane. You have to drag them. They resist. You don't blame them, you'd resist too if you weren't already committed to this terrible decision. One of the other groups nearly loses everything when a section of trail collapses. They're crossing what looks like solid ice when suddenly it's not solid. The ice breaks. Men and dogs and sled plunge partway into the water before catching on more stable ice. They claw their way out, soaked and freezing. In -40 temperatures, being wet is a death sentence unless you dry off immediately. They build a fire using precious fuel, strip naked while huddling around flames that barely provide warmth, and pray their clothes dry before hypothermia sets in. They survive, barely. That night, another group's camp almost breaks apart while they sleep. They wake to sounds of ice cracking, grab what they can, and sprint to more stable ice while their campsite splits into floating chunks behind them. This is normal. This is just Tuesday on the march to Wrangel Island. The ice doesn't care about your schedule or your plans. It does what it wants. You adapt or you die. Those are the options. By day 5, you can see land clearly. It's right there, maybe 20 miles. So close, but those 20 miles might as well be on the moon because between you and land is the worst ice yet. Pressure ridges stacked on pressure ridges, walls 50, 70, 100 feet high, jumbled blocks balanced precariously. You have to cut through them. Captain Bartlett and the other men attack the ice with saws, axes, anything that can chip away frozen water. It's like tunneling through a mountain, except the mountain is ice and keeps shifting and might crush you at any moment. The work is brutal. You swing an axe at ice, your arms burn, your shoulders ache, you chip away a block. Dozens more to go. Hours pass. You've cleared maybe 10 feet of path. The ridge extends for hundreds of feet. You keep working because stopping means accepting defeat. Accepting defeat means dying here. You're not ready to die. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but especially not on this stupid ice ridge 50 miles from land. Meanwhile, the food situation is getting dire. The advance parties left supply depots, but some have been destroyed by weather or wildlife. You reach a cache expecting food and find nothing. The dogs are getting thin, the people are getting thinner, everyone's face is gaunt, hollow-eyed, that particular look of people who are burning more calories than they consume. You're literally eating yourselves for energy. Your body is consuming muscle tissue to stay warm. You can feel yourself weakening day by day, but you keep marching because what else are you going to do? Sit down and freeze? That's quitting. You're not a quitter. You might be an idiot for being here in the first place, but you're not a quitter. Day 8. You're halfway through the worst ridge yet. Everyone's exhausted. Someone suggests leaving the sleds, carrying what you can and making a run for land. Bartlett says no. The sleds have food, fuel, shelter. Leave them and you'll die on Wrangel Island instead of dying on the ice. At least the ice is quick. Starving takes weeks. His logic is cheerful. You keep hauling the sleds. That night is the coldest yet. The thermometer reads -58. That's not a typo, -58 Fahrenheit. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Metal tools will stick to your bare hands and rip skin off when you pull away. Your eyelids freeze shut if you close them too long. You have to sleep with one eye slightly open. This is not a metaphor. You literally cannot fully close your eyes or they'll freeze shut and you'll have to warm them with your hands to open them. Sleeping is an activity that can freeze your face. Let that sink in. You huddle with 2 other men in a tent sharing body warmth. The tent walls crack and pop in the wind. The fabric is so cold it's brittle. You're wearing every piece of clothing you own. You're still cold. You shiver so hard your whole body shakes. This is your body's desperate attempt to generate heat through movement. It's burning energy you don't have. It's unsustainable. But your body doesn't care about sustainability. It cares about the next hour. That's the time horizon now. Not tomorrow, not next week. The next hour. Can you survive one more hour? You survive. Morning comes, the wind dies down slightly. The temperature rises to a balmy -40. You eat half a biscuit and some pemmican that's frozen solid. Chewing frozen pemmican is like chewing rubber mixed with gravel. Your jaw aches, your teeth ache. You eat it anyway because it's calories and calories are life. Day 10. You finally clear the worst pressure ridges. The ice ahead is smoother. You can see Wrangel Island clearly now. It's real, it's close, you might actually make it. This thought energizes you. The dogs feel it too. They pull harder. The sleds move faster. You're covering decent distance now, maybe 8 miles in a day. At this rate you'll reach land in 2 days. 2 days. You've got this. You're going to survive. Day 12. March 12th, 1914. You step onto land. Actual land. Solid ground that isn't moving, isn't breaking apart, isn't trying to kill you. It's just a spit of sand and gravel extending from Wrangel Island. But it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. You kneel down and touch it with your bare hand. Too overcome with emotion to care about the cold. You made it. You survived the march. You're alive. But here's the thing about survival. It's not a destination. It's a process. You made it to land, yes. But you're on an uninhabited island hundreds of miles north of Siberia. You have limited supplies, no communication, no way to get off the island until the ice breaks up enough for a ship to reach you. That won't happen until summer, it's March. You've got 4 or 5 months to survive here. 4 or 5 months of hunting and hoping and praying someone remembers you exist. And remember those advance parties? Anderson's group, Mackay's group. You're expecting to find them here. You search the island, call out their names, look for signs of camps. Nothing, they're not here. Which means they either died on the ice or landed somewhere else, or you don't know. You just know you can't count on their supplies or their help. You're on your own again. Still. But tonight you're too tired to worry about that. Tonight you're just grateful to be off the ice. You build a fire using driftwood. Real wood, not blubber. The smoke smells different. Better. You sit close to the flames, closer than is safe, letting the heat soak into bones that haven't been warm in months. You eat a proper meal, or as proper as you can manage. Seal meat cooked over fire instead of frozen and raw. It's delicious. Or maybe you're just so hungry that anything tastes good. Doesn't matter. For the first time in weeks, you feel something like hope. It won't last. Hope never does when you're fighting the Arctic. But enjoy it while you can, because tomorrow you have to figure out how to survive on this island, and the day after that, and the day after that, for months, with dwindling supplies, with no guarantee of rescue, with the knowledge that 4 months from now you might still be here, watching the horizon for ships that never come, wondering if anyone even remembers the Karluk existed. Sweet dreams. Try not to think about how you're going to explain this to your family if you ever see them again. Try not to calculate your odds of making it to summer. Try not to wonder what happened to the men who didn't make it this far. Just close your eyes and rest. You've earned it. Tomorrow the next chapter of your survival story begins, and it's going to test every ounce of strength you have left. March 12th, 1914. You're on Wrangel Island. Congratulations. You've traded one frozen hell for another, except this one doesn't move. Progress. The island is about 80 miles long and 30 miles wide, roughly the size of Delaware if Delaware was a barren Arctic wasteland with no people, no services, and a climate that actively wants to kill you. Actually, that description might apply to parts of Delaware, but I digress. Bartlett gathers everyone who made it. 17 people, 8 crew members including Bartlett himself, 3 scientists, 1 jack-of-all-trades carpenter, 5 Inuit, the family of 4 plus Kataktovik. Everyone's exhausted, everyone's frostbitten, everyone's malnourished, but everyone's alive, which frankly exceeds expectations. The captain has an orders, split into groups, spread out across the island. This increases hunting territory and, he doesn't say, but everyone understands, reduces interpersonal tension. When you're starving and cold and desperate, proximity breeds conflict. Better to separate people who might kill each other over the last biscuit. Here's a historical fact. Wrangel Island is actually pretty good for wildlife by Arctic standards. Seals haul out on the beaches. Walrus occasionally pass through. Birds nest here in summer. Polar bears wander by. There are even lemmings, those tiny rodents that boom and bust in population cycles. But it's March. Spring hasn't arrived. The birds are gone, the seals are scarce, the walrus are elsewhere. You're essentially trying to hunt an empty larder and hoping something restocks before you starve. Your group sets up camp at a spot later named Rogers Harbour on the south side of the island. The name sounds fancy. The reality is a wind-blasted beach where you build shelter from driftwood and canvas. The wind never stops blowing. Sand gets into everything. Your food, your clothes, your sleeping bag. You're eating sandwiches except the sandwich is just sand. The texture alone makes you want to cry. The daily routine is depressingly simple. Hunt. Eat if you caught something. Don't eat if you didn't. Try to stay warm. Repeat. Some days are successful. Karluk, the Inuit hunter, is a seal hunting machine. He'll sit at a breathing hole for hours, absolutely soon, waiting for a seal to surface. When it does, one shot, clean kill. He drags it back to camp and everyone eats seal meat. It's dark, oily, fishy-tasting meat that some people compare to liver mixed with fish sauce. You love it because it's calories. It's fat. It's life. But Karluk can't catch seals every day. Some days he returns empty-handed. Those are the hard days. You eat portions of seal you normally wouldn't touch. The flippers, which are mostly cartilage and have the texture of rubber. The hide, which you boil for hours until it's soft enough to chew. It tastes like chewing a boot, but it's food. You're past the point of picky eating. You'd eat the seal's dental records if they had nutritional value. The pemmican situation is getting weird. Remember that defective pemmican I mentioned? People are getting sick. Not normal sick. Strange sick. Their legs swell up like balloons. Their faces puff. They become lethargic, unable to move without tremendous effort. It's like watching someone age 50 years in a few weeks. Maluk, the geologist, is hit hardest. He can barely walk. His feet are frostbitten from the march, and now this mystery illness is destroying him from the inside. He lies in his tent, weak and swollen, slowly dying while everyone watches helplessly. Modern doctors would recognize this immediately. Nephritis, kidney inflammation caused by a high-protein, low-fat diet. The pemmican doesn't have enough fat to process all that protein. Your kidneys are basically drowning in protein waste, can't filter it fast enough and start failing. The treatment is simple. Add fat to the diet. But you don't know this. You just know people are dying for reasons you can't understand. It's terrifying. Malok dies on May 17th. He's the first death on Wrangel Island, but he won't be the last. His tent mate Marmon is too weak to bury him. The body lies in the tent for days, slowly decomposing despite the cold. The smell is gigs. Horrific. Finally, McKinley and some others drag Malok's corpse out and bury it under rocks. There's no digging in permafrost. You just pile rocks on top and hope the polar bears don't dig him up. They probably will. Nature recycles everything in the Arctic. Nothing goes to waste. Marmon dies 10 days later. Same symptoms: swelling, weakness, organ failure. He's only 20 years old, a skiing champion from Norway who thought Arctic exploration sounded like an adventure. He dies in a tent on a barren island, thousands of miles from home, his body giving out despite his youth. The Arctic doesn't care about your age or your fitness level. It kills indiscriminately. Old, young, experienced, naive, everyone's equal in the cold. But let's talk about something other than death for a moment, because death is all anyone would remember if that's all there was. Let's talk about Helen and Mugpee, those two Inuit girls who are absolutely thriving in conditions that are breaking grown men. 8-year-old Helen has invented a new hunting technique. She takes a chunk of seal blubber, attaches it to a feather quill with string, and tosses it near seagulls. The gull eats the blubber, the quill catches in its throat like a fish hook, and Helen reels in the bird. She's literally fishing for seagulls. It's genius. She catches several birds a day this way, providing meat when the men's hunts fail. 3-year-old Mugpee is just being 3, which means she's adapting with the flexibility of childhood. She plays on the ice. She helps her mother with sewing. She treats this whole situation like an extended camping trip. Her resilience is inspiring. Or maybe she just doesn't understand the danger. Either way, she's handling Arctic survival better than PhD scientists. Let that humble you. Auntie, their mother, is still sewing clothes for everyone, still teaching people how to survive. The European men's wool clothing is falling apart. Wool doesn't last in these conditions. It gets wet, freezes, tears. Auntie's sealskin garments are holding up perfectly. She's been telling everyone this from the start, but it took months of failure for people to listen. There's a lesson there about respecting indigenous knowledge instead of assuming European methods are superior. The lesson cost several people their lives. By June, the birds are returning. Not a lot, but some. Arctic terns. Gulls. They nest on the island, which means eggs. Fresh eggs. You haven't had eggs in a year. The taste is incredible. Or maybe everything tastes incredible when you've been eating seal flippers for months. The eggs boost morale. They boost health. They provide fat and protein in a form that doesn't cause kidney failure. You start to think maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this. Then the birds leave and you're back to seal hunting. The seals are fewer now. They're migrating, following food sources, doing seal things that don't involve being convenient meals for starving humans. The hunting gets harder. Days pass without a kill, then weeks. You're supplementing meals with anything remotely edible. Lemmings, when you can catch them. They're tiny, mostly fur and bones, but it's meat. You eat rotten seal meat that's been sitting too long. The smell makes you gag, but starvation is a powerful motivator. You'll eat things you'd normally feed to a garbage disposal. The social dynamics are fracturing. Remember Brady, the fireman? He's been acting strange. People suspect him of stealing food. Small amounts go missing. Accusations fly. Trust erodes. On June 25th, a gunshot echoes across the camp. Everyone rushes to Brady's tent. He's dead. Single gunshot wound. Suicide, accident, murder. Nobody knows. Nobody can approve anything. Williamson, the engineer, is suspected by some. Hadley flat out calls it murder. But there's no investigation. No trial. No justice system. You're on an island hundreds of miles from civilization. You bury Brady under rocks like you buried the others and try not to think about what his death means. Did someone kill him? Did he kill himself from despair? Was it truly an accident? These questions will never be answered. The Arctic keeps its secrets. July 1st is Canada Day, or Dominion Day as it's called then. You raise a Canadian flag at Rogers Harbour. It's a small gesture of hope, a claim of sovereignty, a reminder that you're still Canadian citizens even if your country seems to have forgotten you exist. The flag snaps in the constant wind. Red and white against the grey sky is beautiful in a bleak sort of way. You take comfort where you can find it. By August, you're seriously worried. Summer is ending. Ships should have come by now if they're coming at all, but the horizon stays empty. No smokestacks, no sails, no sounds of engines, nothing but ice and water and the occasional seal. You start preparing mentally for another winter. Can you survive it? Maybe. Do you want to? That's a harder question. Another winter means more cold, more hunger, more death. At some point, survival stops being worth the effort. You're not there yet, but you can see that point from here. It's approaching, like winter, like death, and inevitable unless something changes. You lie in your tent at night, listening to the wind. It sounds like voices sometimes, screaming across the frozen waste. Maybe it's the wind, maybe it's the ghosts of men who died here. Maybe it's your own despair manifesting as auditory hallucinations. Doesn't matter. You pull your sleeping bag tighter and try to dream of home. Warm beds, hot meals, people who care if you live or die. The dreams are so vivid they feel real. More real than this nightmare you're living. That's dangerous, that's how people give up. They retreat into fantasy and never come back. You force yourself to stay present. Stay alert, stay alive. Because giving up would make all this suffering meaningless. You've come too far to quit now, but you wouldn't blame someone if they did quit. This is too much, too long, too hard. You're running on fumes, on stubbornness, on the thin hope that someone somewhere remembers you exist and is coming to help. That hope is all you have. Guard it carefully. It's the only thing keeping you alive. March 18, 1914. Captain Bartlett stands in front of the assembled survivors on Wrangel Island and makes an announcement that sounds completely insane. He's leaving. He and Kataktovik, the young Inuit hunter, are going to walk to Siberia, then walk along the Siberian coast to the Bering Strait, then find a ship to Alaska, then send a rescue mission. It's only about 700 miles, across moving ice, in Arctic temperatures, with limited supplies. What could possibly go wrong? Here's the thing, it's actually the right call. Nobody knows you're on Wrangel Island. Stefansson might have reported the Karluk missing, but he doesn't know where you ended up. You could wait on the island hoping someone stumbles across you, but that's basically playing the lottery with survival. Better to actively seek rescue even if the journey is suicidal. At least it's doing something. Humans need agency. Waiting passively for death is psychologically harder than dying while trying. Bartlett picks Kataktovik because Kataktovik knows how to survive on ice. Also, the other Inuk Karluk has a family who needs him. You can't ask a man to abandon his wife and children to certain death. Kataktovik is young, single, skilled, and brave enough to volunteer for this suicide mission. He's either very courageous or very stupid. Probably both. Those qualities overlap more than people admit. They leave with 7 dogs, a sled loaded with supplies, and enough food for 48 days. That should be plenty, assuming they're the average 15 miles per day and nothing goes wrong. Of course, this is the Arctic. Everything goes wrong. It's basically the Arctic's hobby. The first few days are brutal. The ice between Wrangel Island and Siberia is even worse than the ice you cross to reach the island. Pressure ridges everywhere, open leads of water. The ice is constantly moving, breaking apart, or reforming. They have to detour around obstacles, adding miles to an already impossible journey. Some days they travel 12 hours and make 5 miles of progress. The math is not encouraging. Listen to the sound of dogs straining at their harnesses, the crunch of snow under boots, Bartlett's breathing rhythmic and steady despite the burning cold, Kataktovik's occasional comments in Inupiaq pointing out landmarks warning about weak ice. The silence between the sounds is profound. No birds, no wind sometimes, just the frozen wasteland stretching in all directions, indifferent to their suffering. Here's a historical fact. Bartlett and Kataktovik crossed ice that modern climate scientists say shouldn't have been crossable. The temperature averaged -40. Storm systems rolled through regularly, reducing visibility to 0. They navigated using a compass and dead reckoning, hoping they were going the right direction, unable to verify until they reached land. One wrong turn and they'd walk for weeks before realizing they were lost. Then they'd die. Simple as that. They run into their first major crisis around day 10. A storm hits, not a gentle snow shower, a full Arctic blizzard that reduces the world to white chaos. They can't see the dogs 5 feet ahead. They can't set up camp because the wind would tear the tent apart. They have to keep moving, hoping they don't walk off an ice edge into open water. They march for 18 hours straight, exhausted and frozen, until the storm passes. When they finally stop, they're so tired they collapse without eating. The dogs curl up in the snow, frost forming on their fur. Everyone sleeps like the dead. That's not a metaphor you want to take literally, but it's accurate. Day 14. They reach land, Cape Jacan on the northern coast of Siberia. Bartlett calculates they've been travelling for about a month, which matches his estimates. They made decent time considering the conditions. Decent meaning didn't die, which is really all you can ask for out here. But reaching Siberia isn't the end. It's barely the middle. They need to travel along the coast to East Cape, the closest point to Alaska. That's another 400 miles. And they're travelling through Chukchi territory. The Chukchi are the indigenous people of northern Siberia. Kataktovik is terrified. He's heard stories about how Chukchi people treat outsiders, especially Alaskan Inuit. The stories are not encouraging. They involve words like hostile and violent, and historically justified reasons for being suspicious of outsiders. Turns out the stories are wrong, or at least not universally true. They reach a Chukchi village, and are welcomed with hospitality that brings Bartlett to tears. The villagers give them food, shelter, help repair their sled. They refuse payment. They just help because that's what you do for travellers in the Arctic. You help, because next time it might be you who needs help. This is a lesson that civilized society has mostly forgotten, but Arctic communities never did. Generosity isn't weakness, it's survival strategy. They travel from village to village, always welcomed, always helped. Bartlett trades goods for supplies when he can. He trades his Colt revolver for a strong dog. He trades cloth for food. He trades stories for shelter. The Chukchi people are fascinated by this strange white man and his Inuit companion travelling through their land. They ask where he's going, why he's travelling. Bartlett explains about the shipwreck, the stranded crew, the desperate need for rescue. The Chukchi nod. They understand desperation. They understand loss. They help him continue. The cold is relentless. Even by Arctic standards, this is a brutal spring. Temperatures stay below -50. Hurricane-force winds blow for days. Bartlett later writes that he never experienced cold like this, and he's travelled with Peary to within miles of the North Pole. This is worse. The wind doesn't just blow, it attacks. It finds every gap in your clothing and extracts heat like a vampire extracts blood. You're constantly fighting to stay warm, burning calories you don't have, wearing out your body in ways that won't be apparent until later. They lose dogs along the way. Exhaustion, injury. One falls through ice and drowns before they can save it. Each loss makes the journey harder. Fewer dogs means slower travel, it means lighter loads, it means abandoning supplies. They're travelling lighter and lighter, stripped down to essentials, racing the limits of their endurance against the distance remaining. April 24th, they reach Emmertown, a settlement near East Cape. They've been travelling for 37 days. They've covered roughly 700 miles. Bartlett looks like death. He's lost probably 40 pounds. His face is gaunt, windburned, frostbitten. His feet are in terrible shape. He can barely walk, but he's alive. They both are. Against all odds, despite impossible conditions, they made it. Kataktovik stays in Emmertown. He's earned rest. Bartlett continues on, desperate to reach a ship to send word to start the rescue mission. He meets Baron Kleist, a Russian official who offers help. They travel together to Emma Harbour on the coast. There, Bartlett learns that Captain Pedersen, an old acquaintance, is in the area with a whaling vessel. On May 21st, Pedersen arrives in the Herman. Bartlett doesn't even wait to rest properly. They sail immediately for Alaska. They reach St. Michael, Alaska on May 28th. Bartlett sends a wireless message to Ottawa. The Karluk sank. Survivors are on Wrangel Island. Send rescue. The message is received. Government officials express shock and concern. They promise action. Bartlett doesn't trust promises. He starts searching for a rescue ship himself. This is the critical period. Bartlett made his 700-mile walk. He sent word. Now he needs a ship capable of reaching Wrangel Island through Arctic ice. This is not a simple request. Most ships can't handle those conditions. The ones that can are expensive and already committed to other jobs. Bartlett is essentially asking someone to risk a valuable vessel and crew to rescue people that most folks assumed were already dead. The bureaucracy moves slowly. The ice moves fast. Every day of delay is another day the survivors might be dying. Bartlett eventually finds the USCS Bear, a revenue cutter with Arctic experience. The captain agrees to attempt the rescue, but they can't leave until they get official permission and additional fuel. More delays, more bureaucracy. Bartlett is losing his mind. He's exhausted, injured, traumatized by months of survival stress, and now he has to navigate government red tape while people under his command are starving on an island. The frustration is unbearable, but what can he do except wait? He's done everything humanly possible. He walked 700 miles, he crossed impossible ice, he navigated by stars and hope. He relied on the kindness of strangers in the most hostile environment on Earth. He survived. Now he has to trust that the system will work, that someone will mount the rescue mission, that the survivors can hold on a little longer. Meanwhile, on Wrangel Island, you don't know any of this. You don't know Bartlett made it. You don't know help is coming. You just know another day has passed without rescue. Another week, another month. The hope that kept you alive is fading. The island is running out of food. Winter is approaching again. You might have survived one winter. Can you survive two? The answer, for some of you, is no. But for others, the answer is yes, and that's what makes this story remarkable. Not that some people died. Death is easy in the Arctic. What's remarkable is that anyone survived at all. That human stubbornness, ingenuity, and sheer refusal to quit can overcome odds that should be insurmountable. Bartlett's 700-mile journey is a testament to that. One man and one Inuit hunter doing what everyone said was impossible. They didn't do it because they were special. They did it because giving up meant death. And they weren't ready to die. That's the secret to survival. It's not about being tough or strong or smart. It's about being unwilling to quit. About taking one more step when your body is screaming to stop. About getting up one more time when staying down would be so much easier. Bartlett and Kataktovik got up. They kept walking. And because they did, there's a chance you'll be rescued. But only if you survive long enough for that rescue to arrive. August 1914. You're sitting on Wrangel Island watching the ice. Again. You've been watching the ice for months now, hoping to see a ship. Every day, nothing. The horizon stays empty, the ice stays solid. The hope stays fragile. You're starting to think this is how you die. Not dramatically in a storm, not heroically fighting a polar bear, just quietly sitting on a beach, watching an empty ocean until you run out of food and then you stop watching altogether. 3 people have already died on the island. Malak, Mum, Bredy. You've buried them under rocks and tried not to think about joining them. The survivors are thin, weak, desperate. Some days you catch enough to eat properly. Most days you don't. You're living meal to meal, hoping today's hunt succeeds, trying not to think about tomorrow. Planning ahead is a luxury. You're in survival mode where ahead means the next 4 hours. Here's a historical fact. By August 2014, the Canadian government hadn't organised any rescue mission. They knew the Karluk was lost. They'd received Stefansson's reports, but they were dealing with something bigger. World War I had just started. Europe was tearing itself apart. Canada was sending men to fight. Resources were stretched. A rescue mission to the Arctic for 24 people who were probably dead anyway? Not exactly a priority. This is the brutal calculation of crisis triage. Your suffering doesn't matter if there's bigger suffering elsewhere. Your life doesn't matter if there are wars to fight. You're forgotten not because people are cruel, but because they're overwhelmed. It's not personal. That doesn't make it any less terrible. But Bartlett hasn't forgotten. He's in Alaska, frustrated beyond measure, dealing with delays and bureaucracy and ships that can't make the journey. He finally gets permission to use the Bear, that revenue cutter I mentioned. They depart St. Michael on July 13th, late, very late. The ice is starting to form again. By September it'll be too thick to navigate. They have maybe 6 weeks to find you before winter makes rescue impossible. If they miss that window, you're spending another winter on Wrangel Island. Most of you won't survive that. The Bear makes slow progress north. She's a good ship, but she's not an icebreaker. Heavy ice stops her cold. They push through when they can, detour when they can't, make slow, steady progress toward Wrangel Island. Bartlett stands on deck watching the ice, navigating by memory and instinct, praying they're not too late. He hasn't slept properly in weeks. The stress is destroying him. But he keeps going because 15 people are counting on him. 14 now. He doesn't know Brady died. He's about to find out how many more are gone. August 21, the bear reaches a point about 20 miles from Wrangel Island and hits ice too thick to penetrate. They try for days, ram the ice, back up, ram again. The ice doesn't care. It's like trying to break through a concrete wall by running at it with your shoulder. Technically possible if you have infinite time and don't mind shattered shoulders, practically impossible. Captain Cochrane, the bear's master, makes a hard decision. They have to turn back, resupply, try again. Bartlett is devastated. He's so close. 20 miles, he can see the island. But 20 miles of Arctic ice might as well be 20,000. They retreat to Nome to refuel and prepare for another attempt. Bartlett feels like he's failing. Again, still, forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember I mentioned King and Winge earlier? That's a commercial walrus hunting vessel captained by Olaf Swenson. Bartlett meets Swenson in Nome and essentially begs him, if you're heading to the Siberian walrus hunting grounds anyway, could you please swing by Wrangel Island and check for survivors? Swenson agrees. He's not equipped for rescue, but he can at least see if anyone's alive. Information is better than nothing. September 4th. Both ships depart Nome. The Bear for Wrangel Island with Bartlett aboard, the King and Winge for Siberia via Wrangel Island with Stefansson's secretary McConnell aboard. They're racing weather, racing ice, racing time itself. Any day now winter will slam the door shut and nobody's getting through until next spring. September 7th, 1914, morning. You're at Rogers Harbour doing morning routine, checking truss, feeding dogs, pretending you have hope. Then you hear it. A sound you haven't heard in over a year. A ship's whistle. You freeze. Is that real? Are you hallucinating? You've been out here so long that your brain might be inventing rescues to cope with hopelessness. But no. You hear it again, louder. It's real. There's a ship, you run to the beach. Everyone runs. There she is. The King and Winge sitting a quarter mile offshore. You're screaming, crying, laughing, waving your arms like a lunatic. The ship sees you. They send a boat. You're rescued. After 13 months stranded in the Arctic, after burying friends, after eating things that shouldn't be eaten and surviving things that should have killed you, someone came. Someone actually came. The boat reaches shore. You climb aboard. 14 of you. 14 survivors from the original 25 who were on the Karluk when she sank. 11 dead, 14 alive, those are the numbers. That's the price of this disaster. You're one of the lucky ones. You survived. That should feel better than it does. Survivor's guilt is a hell of a thing. The King and Winge picks up survivors from another camp at Waring Point. Everyone's aboard, everyone's safe. The ship turns south toward Alaska. Then the next day you encounter the Bear with Bartlett aboard. There's a debate about which ship should carry the survivors. Bartlett insists everyone transfer to the Bear. The survivors want to stay on the King and Winge, the ship that actually rescued them, but Bartlett is their captain. His word is law. You transfer to the Bear. The reunion with Bartlett is emotional. He's simultaneously overjoyed that you survived and devastated by the losses. 11 men. 11 men under his command who didn't make it home. He'll carry that for the rest of his life. Command means responsibility. Responsibility means guilt when things go wrong. Bartlett didn't personally kill anyone, but he made decisions that affected outcomes. That's the burden of leadership. You make the best choices you can with limited information and pray you don't have to count bodies later. The Bear attempts to reach Herald Island. Remember Anderson's party? The 4 men who left Shipwreck Camp in January and disappeared? There's still hope they made it there. The Bear gets within 12 miles, but ice blocks further progress. No signs of life visible through binoculars. Bartlett makes the hard call. Leave them, presumed dead. Focus on getting the confirmed survivors to safety. Another weight added to his conscience. Another decision that seems right but feels wrong. September 13th, 1914. The Bear arrives in Nome, Alaska. You step onto solid ground for the first time in over a year. American soil, civilization. There are buildings, real buildings with walls and heat and beds. There are people, lots of people. They're cheering. They're treating you like heroes. You don't feel like a hero, you feel like someone who got lucky. There's a difference. The press descends. Everyone wants your story. What was it like? How did you survive? Tell us about the cold. Tell us about the hunger. Tell us about watching people die. You answer their questions because what else can you do? But you can't explain it. Not really. Words don't capture what it feels like to be that cold, that hungry, that desperate. They want adventure stories. You lived through trauma. Those aren't the same thing. Bartlett becomes an instant hero. The press loves him. Captain who walked 700 miles to save his crew. It's a good headline, it's true. He did do that. But he's also the captain whose ship sank, whose expedition leader abandoned them, whose crew suffered for months. The press glosses over those parts. Heroes are simpler to write about than complex humans who made both good and bad decisions. Some survivors are angry, McKinley particularly. He feels Stefansson abandoned them. He feels the expedition was mismanaged from day one. He feels people died who should have lived. He's not wrong. But his anger doesn't change anything. The dead stay dead. The mistakes stay made. All you can do is survive with the consequences. Stefansson, meanwhile, is still in the Arctic, still exploring. He doesn't return to civilization until 1918, 4 years after the Karluk sank. When he does return, he receives honours, medals, speaking fees, book deals. The Canadian Arctic expedition, despite losing its flagship and 11 men, is considered a success because Stefansson discovered some new islands and conducted scientific research. The narrative becomes about exploration triumph, not disaster. About what was gained, not what was lost. This pisses off a lot of people. How can you call an expedition successful when 11 men died? When the flagship sank? When the leader abandoned his crew? But success is measured by whoever writes the report. Stefansson wrote the reports. He shaped the narrative. The survivors wrote memoirs, but those came out later, after the official story was set. By then most people had moved on. World War I killed millions. Who cares about 11 men in the Arctic? This is how the Karluk disaster becomes buried. Not through conspiracy, through narrative control, timing and priorities. The story that gets remembered is the story someone with power decides to tell. Stefansson had power. The survivors didn't. So history remembers the friendly Arctic and forgets the 11 frozen bodies. But you remember. You'll remember for the rest of your life. The sound of ice cracking, the taste of rotten seal, the cold that never left your bones, the faces of friends who didn't make it home. Malak, Mamen, Brady, Anderson, Mackay, Murray, Bouchard, Morris. The others, you'll remember them when no one else does. That's your burden now. Being the memory keeper for a disaster the world wants to forget. You have a choice now. You can be angry about what happened. You can fight to set the record straight. Or you can move on. Try to heal. Build a life that isn't defined by those 30 months of hell. Different survivors choose different paths. Some speak out, some stay silent. Some live long lives. Some die young, their bodies weakened by Arctic trauma. McKinley lives to 95. He writes a book in 1976, 62 years after the disaster, finally telling his version. It's called the Karluk, the great untold story of Arctic exploration. The title says everything. Untold story. For 62 years he carried this, waiting for the right time to speak. He outlived most other survivors. He outlived Stefansson. He finally got to shape the narrative, at least a little. But by then, did anyone care? Did it change history? Or was it just an old man's vindication, important to him but forgotten by everyone else? You survived the Arctic. Can you survive the aftermath? Can you survive being forgotten? Can you survive guilt and anger and trauma that never quite heals? That's the real test. The ice tried to kill you and failed. Now life tries to move past you. Which fight is harder? I honestly don't know. What I do know is this. You're standing in Nome in September 1914. You're alive. Against impossible odds, despite catastrophic failures, through luck and stubbornness and the kindness of strangers, you survived. That's worth something. Even if history forgets, even if Stefansson gets the glory, even if people dismiss your suffering as just another footnote in Arctic exploration. You know what you endured, you know what it cost, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Now go take a hot bath, eat a real meal, sleep in a bed, you've earned it. Tomorrow, you'll start figuring out how to live as a survivor. But tonight, just rest. The Arctic can't reach you anymore. You're safe, finally, truly safe. You'd think survival would be the end of the story. You made it. You're alive. Credits roll, everyone goes home happy. But survival is just the beginning of a different kind of nightmare. Let's talk about what happens after you escape the Arctic. Spoiler, it's complicated. The physical damage is obvious and extensive. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes from multiple survivors. Chafe, the steward, lost all his toes. The second engineer, Williamson, had to amputate them with improvised tools on the island. No anaesthesia, just a sailor biting down on leather while someone cuts frozen flesh from his feet with a knife and saw made for other purposes. He survives the operation. The scars last forever. Others have lung damage from breathing frozen air for months. Your lungs aren't designed for that. Each breath was like inhaling glass. That damage doesn't heal, it compounds over years. You'll have breathing problems for life, you'll catch pneumonia easier, you'll age faster. The Arctic took years from you. You just won't realise how many until you're older and your body fails in ways it shouldn't. Then there's the psychological damage. PTSD wasn't a diagnosis in 1914. Shell shock existed for soldiers, but civilians were expected to just deal with trauma. Stiff upper lip. Move on. Don't complain. So you don't talk about the nightmares. About waking up convinced you're back on the ice. About panic attacks when the temperature drops. About how you can't throw away food anymore, even spoiled food, because your brain still thinks starvation is imminent. About trust issues. About anger. About grief that hits you at random moments decades later. Some survivors handle it better than others. Bartlett returns to Arctic exploration. He spends the next 30 years leading expeditions, surveying, supplying northern communities. The Arctic nearly killed him, but he goes back. Maybe because it's all he knows, maybe because civilian life feels empty after facing death daily. Maybe because he's running from guilt. He never talks about the Karluk much. He writes one account, brief and factual, then moves on. He dies in 46 and at age 70, still respected, still haunted. McKinley becomes a teacher. He goes back to Scotland, teaches science, lives quietly. He doesn't write about the Karluk for 62 years. 62 years of carrying this story, this anger, this need to set the record straight. Finally, in 76, he's at age 87, he publishes his memoir. It's bitter. It's detailed. It's the account of a man who spent 6 decades processing trauma. He dies in 1983, having outlived almost everyone else from the expedition. The last voice, the final witness. Williamson, the engineer who lost his toes, never speaks publicly about the expedition, never writes a memoir, never gives interviews. He lives to 97, dying in 75, but the Karluk stays locked inside him. Some trauma you process by talking, some trauma you process by never talking again. Both strategies have costs. The Inuit survivors return to their communities. Karluk, Karuk, Helen, and Magpie go back to Point Barrow. They resume their lives. The Arctic is their home. They don't see it as a hostile force that tried to kill them. It's just where they live. Their relationship with the Arctic is fundamentally different from the European survivors. For them, this was terrible luck, yes, but not an aberration. Just the Arctic being the Arctic. They adapt, they survive, they continue. Magpie, that 3-year-old girl, lives to 97. She dies in 2008, the last survivor of the Karluk. Think about that. A woman born in 1911, survived the Arctic at age 3, lived through World War I, World War II, the Cold War, the Internet Age, and died in the era of smartphones. Her lifespan covered almost a century. The Karluk was just the first chapter. She lived a whole life after. That's resilience. That's the human capacity to survive and continue despite trauma. But what about the 11 who didn't survive? What's their legacy? Here, where it gets frustrating. Their names are forgotten by most people. Can you name them without looking them up? I mentioned them earlier, but be honest, do you remember? Malloch, Mummen, Brady, Anderson, Mackay, Murray, Boucher, Morris, Brady, Barker. Go lightly. 11 men, 11 lives. 11 families who got telegrams saying their son, brother, husband, father died in the Arctic. Anderson's party wasn't found until 1924, 10 years later. A ship landed on Wrangel Island and discovered human remains. Personal effects identified them as Anderson, Barker, Brady, and Golightly. They'd reached the island but couldn't leave. They died there, the cause unclear. Enough supplies to survive, but they didn't. Maybe illness. Maybe carbon monoxide poisoning from burning blubber in an enclosed space. Maybe just despair. Sometimes the body gives up even when conditions say you should survive. McKee's party vanished completely. 4 men, absorbed by the Arctic, leaving only a scarf as evidence they existed. No graves, no remains, just gone. Their families never got closure, never got to bury them. That's a special kind of grief, the not knowing, the wondering, the inability to say goodbye properly. And here's the thing that makes this even more tragic. It was avoidable. Not the sinking necessarily. Ships sink, ice happens. But the rushed preparation, avoidable. The inadequate ship, avoidable. Stefansson leaving the vessel, avoidable. The defective pemmican, avoidable. These men died because of human decisions, not natural disaster. Nature provided the setting, humans provided the mistakes. Should someone have been held accountable? Absolutely. Was anyone? Not really. The Canadian government commissioned an inquiry that mostly criticised Bartlett for taking the Karluk into the ice. As if he had a choice. As if the expedition wasn't already doomed by decisions made before he even took command. Stefansson faced criticism from survivors but official censure. Honours withdrawn? Consequences? Nope. He continued his career, wrote best-selling books, became a respected Arctic expert. He died wealthy and honoured in 62 at age 82. Some survivors, particularly McKinley, petitioned the Canadian government for a full investigation. They wanted the truth about Stefansson's decisions, about the expedition's management, about why 11 men died unnecessarily. The government declined. Too much time had passed, they said. World War I had started. Resources were stretched. Investigating a failed Arctic expedition wasn't a priority. The official response was essentially, "That's unfortunate. Let's move on." This is how injustice becomes history. Not through evil conspiracy, but through bureaucratic inertia. Through priorities that shift. Through powerful people protecting their reputations. Through exhausted officials deciding that stirring up old controversy isn't worth the effort. The truth gets buried not because someone actively suppresses it, but because no one fights hard enough to dig it up. And that's why the Karluk is buried, compared to other Arctic disasters. The Franklin expedition lost 159 men, generated decades of search missions, inspired books and songs and legends. Everyone knows about Franklin. The Karluk lost 11 men, generated one rescue mission, inspired a few memoirs that most people haven't read. It's forgotten not because it's less tragic, but because the timing was wrong, the politics were complicated, and the people who could have kept it in public memory chose not to. There's also the factor of narrative competition. The Karluk disaster happened in 1914. World War I started that summer. Suddenly millions of people were dying in Europe. 11 men in the Arctic. That's a rounding error compared to the Somme, Verdun, Passchendaele. Public attention moved to bigger tragedies. The Karluk became a footnote, a minor incident in a year full of death. But here's what we can learn from this disaster. What makes it relevant today? Preparation matters, leadership matters, accountability matters. When you cut corners, when you prioritise ambition over safety, when you let ego override expertise, people die. That's not just true in the Arctic. That's true in business, in politics, in any human endeavour where lives depend on decisions. Stefansson wanted glory. He wanted to be remembered as a great explorer. He got his wish, he's in history books, but his glory came at the cost of 11 lives. Was it worth it? Would he say yes? Would you? Bartlett wanted to serve. He wanted to do his job, command his ship, bring everyone home safely. He didn't get his wish. 11 men died under his command. He did everything he could. Made impossible journeys, saved 14 lives. But he's remembered by historians as a hero with an asterisk. Hero who lost 11 men. The asterisk follows him forever. The survivors wanted to live. They wanted to come home. 14 succeeded. 11 didn't. The difference between success and failure was often luck. Being in the right group, making the right decision at a critical moment, having the right skills, or just random chance. The ice broke under this person, but not that person. This seal appeared for this hunter, but not that one. Like the great determiner of survival. So what's the moral of the Karluk disaster? That nature is powerful? We knew that. That Arctic exploration is dangerous? Obviously. That poor planning kills people? Sure. But I think the real lesson is about memory. About who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. About how history is written by survivors and shaped by power. About how injustice doesn't need an evil villain. It just needs enough people to shrug and move on. 11 men died in the Arctic. They should have lived. Their deaths should have meant something, should have changed how expeditions were run, should have led to reforms, investigations, accountability. Instead, they became a footnote, a buried disaster, a story that history tried to forget, but you know the story now. You spent this whole video living through their experience, feeling their cold, sharing their fear, watching them die. That's worth something. Memory is worth something, even if the world moved on and even if officials chose not to care, you know. And maybe that's enough to keep them alive in some small way. So here's your final question, the one you should ask yourself. Would you have survived? Would you have been strong enough? Smart enough? Luckier? Be one of the 14 instead of one of the 11? Or would you be a name I listed earlier, a casualty of bad planning and worse luck, buried under rocks on an Arctic island while the world forgot you existed? Think about that. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's honest. Survival isn't guaranteed. It's not a reward for being good or brave or deserving. It's often just luck. And the Karluk survivors knew that. They carried it forever. The knowledge that they lived and friends died for no good reason. That's the burden of surviving. Not just the trauma of what you endured, but the guilt of still being here when others aren't. The Arctic doesn't care about your story. It doesn't care if you survive or die. It's just ice and cold and indifferent eternity. But we're not the Arctic. We're human. We have memory. We have the capacity to care. We can choose to remember the forgotten, honour the buried, tell the stories that power once silenced. The Karluk disaster was buried by history, but not by us, not anymore. We dug it up, we looked at what happened, we honoured the dead by remembering their names and how they died. That's all we can do for them now, but it's not nothing. Memory is never nothing. So the next time you're cold, truly cold, maybe remember the Karluk. Remember people who survived months of cold that would kill you in hours. Remember that human endurance is remarkable. Remember that survival is hard and recovery is harder, and justice is hardest of all. Remember 11 men who died because someone cut corners and no one was held accountable. And maybe, just maybe, demand better. From leaders, from institutions, from the systems that send people into danger. Because the Karluk shouldn't have sank. Those men shouldn't have died. And the story shouldn't have been buried. But it was. Unless we keep telling it. Unless we refuse to let it be forgotten. Unless we say, this happened, it mattered, they mattered, and we remember. That's the end of the story. You survived. Some didn't. History moved on. But now you know, and knowing is the first step to making sure it never happens again. Or at least that when it does happen, someone is held accountable. Someone faces consequences. Someone admits that lives lost to human error aren't just unfortunate accidents, but failures that demand better. The Arctic is still there, still cold, still indifferent, still claiming lives when humans venture into it unprepared. But we can choose to learn, to remember, to demand that the next expedition doesn't repeat the Karluk's mistakes. That's how we honour the dead. Not with monuments or memorials, though those are nice. But with change, with accountability, with refusing to bury disasters just because they're inconvenient. The Karluk was buried once. We just dug her up. Let's make sure she stays remembered. The 11 men who died deserve that much. The 14 who survived deserved better. And the next expedition, whenever and wherever it is, deserves leaders who learned from this disaster. That's the lesson. That's the point. That's why we tell stories about things that happened a century ago. Not because the past is fascinating, though it is, but because the past teaches us how to survive the present and build a better future. Now go enjoy your warm house, your reliable heat, your abundant food, your safety that you take for granted. You earned it by not being born in 1913 and signing up for an Arctic expedition led by an egomaniac in a ship held together with hope and bad decisions. That's the real lesson. Sometimes the best survival strategy is not putting yourself in stupid situations in the first place. But if you do find yourself trapped on Arctic ice with a sinking ship and an absent leader, remember the Karluk survivors. They made it. Against impossible odds, through strength, luck, and the kindness of strangers. You might too, or you might not. The Arctic doesn't care, but the survivors will remember you. And maybe, just maybe, they'll tell your story to someone 100 years later. And for that brief moment, you'll live again in memory. That's the closest thing to immortality most of us get. Sweet dreams, try not to dream about the ice. So here's your final question to think about as you drift off to sleep. If you were Captain Bartlett, would you have stayed with the ship? Or would you have done what Stefansson did and left before disaster struck? Is it leadership to stay and face the consequences, or is it wisdom to recognise a doomed situation and save yourself? There's no easy answer, but think about it. And maybe in the morning drop your answer in the comments. Would you have stayed or would you have walked away? Your survival might depend on choosing correctly. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this dive into forgotten disasters. And remember, the Arctic is still there, still cold, still waiting. Respect it, or become another story that history tries to bury.